Can you guys see that? This is my giant collection. And by giant, I do mean literally. This is a trio of Henry James's final novels, his last great novels. The Ambassadors, The Golden Bowl, and The Outcry. The page I just showed you all is the page that I am on currently in The Golden Bowl. I love that book, but more about Henry James in a bit. Today I am doing the favorite writers tag. I keep up with, as you know from the first video, I keep up with Steve Donoghue, and he did this amazing tag. He created it from, as I'm sure a lot of you already know, he created it from another video, which I will link below, that was actually not intended to be a tag. It was by What Page Are You On? And for the tag, you are meant to list 6 authors who are not quite your favorites, 4 authors who are maybe your favorites, and then your 5 favorite authors. Now, if I understand this correctly, the 6 authors who are not quite, they're flawed in certain ways that keep them from your favorites list at all times. The 4 authors who are maybe are authors who on certain days or during certain periods of your life might be your favorites. Then, of course, the 5 favorites. That's easy enough, self-explanatory. So, I'm going to get right into this immediately because I'm afraid that this will end up a little bit longer than my intro, and that was long enough. So, 6 authors who are not quite. For my first one, and yes, I brought props. I have books by all of these authors right here. Okay, for my 6 not quite, first among them, I have Plato, the great philosopher Plato. Now, I do read philosophy. Yes, I do. I love to read philosophy. In my first video, I said that I do not read to learn. Right. So it may seem a little ironic, but it isn't. When you read Plato, you read Nietzsche, you read Foucault, or even Albert Camus, and you realize that for the most part, they're pretty much wrong. On just about everything they could possibly say, they are in one way or another wrong. The fascination is in, again, that very thing that I love the most, their language. Plato, unfortunately, I cannot read Greek, so I have to settle for a translation. But this particular translation by W.H.D. Rouse is amazing. This is so good. Plato was the philosopher most famous for writing the Republic, which was a, pretty much if you want to say it this way, it was his most prominent original work. The other dialogues that he wrote centered around Socrates and the teachings of Socrates. So in a way, you could say that those are, they're written as, they're not exactly, but they are written as recorded dialogues, conversations, speeches, and of course, in the end, the defense of Socrates by himself at his trial. So, yes, that is that. I want to move along. I don't want to spend too much time on these. I have a lot of books to cover. So, Plato, he is number 1 on the list of 6 not quites. Next, Samuel Johnson. Okay, this is my wonderful Oxford edition of Samuel Johnson's major works. I just got this. I just started reading Samuel Johnson about a week ago. That's actually why he's here. That's why he's on the not quite. I do not think that you really can say that an author is your favorite until you have at least read a complete book of theirs, a collection, whatever it may be. You have to have read enough of them, and I have only read about 4 or 5 of the pieces in this particular book. There's fiction, poetry, essays, all kinds of things in here. This is so, I can't praise this enough. This is amazing. This is absolutely amazing. I'm enormously into nonfiction, enormously into it. Philosophy, criticism, cultural essays, any kind of commentary, whatever it may be. Now, of course, Plato I picked first. I chose to show all of you first because he runs through everyone. Plato is in everything that is written concerning thought, on art, on people, society, anything at all. Plato is present at all times. So, I have Johnson here as a critic. Plato is indeed here. He read him. He did. And this is just so good. Okay, moving on. I have to move on. Okay, this is amazing. This is amazing. Next. W.E.B. Du Bois, as he is called mainly in the United States, and as I think he usually called himself. I believe that he pronounced his own name that way for particularly his American compatriots. So, here he is. And I have read the entirety of The Souls of Black Folk. Yes, indeed. And I cannot tell you what an experience that was for me. Reading The Souls of Black Folk was like having a complete human being sitting in front of you and handing you an entire world of suffering, of hope, of intellect, so many things in a single sitting. You don't really know how to process it at first. You don't. You can't. You can't possibly know how to process writing like that in a moment. It takes some rereading. It takes rethinking, questioning, constant cogitation in order to really make sense of what it is he is doing in his writing. He was an aesthete. He was absolutely an aesthete. I love all of the high aesthetes. Well, not all. Sorry to the Forster fans. But he, Du Bois, yes, he wrote about the suffering of the slaves. Yes, he wrote about so many things that are still today of concern in the United States and everywhere else. But in my view, he was more than just a social commentator, a social critic, an activist. Though as an activist, let me tell you, you don't get to be more powerful throughout time, across time. You don't get to be more truly influential, truly resonant as Du Bois. But he was a full mind, artistic mind, intellectual mind. His erudition is astounding. It's truly astounding just to see the many different things that he can cram into any one of his works. The many things you never knew before. So there's that. Okay. The reason that he doesn't make it into the next section quite is that, to be honest, I think I've read too little of him. And so I've read the one book mainly, and I've started on his dissertation, his college dissertation. But I've read too little, so he can't quite make it there. Okay, now next. What do we have here? Okay. Dante Alighieri, the Great and Powerful. I cannot read Italian, unfortunately. I've been trying to learn Italian, but, well, reading it, especially Dantean Italian, that's going to take some time. Uh, I have the Longfellow translation of Dante. I want no other. I will never have another translation. If this here gets damaged or somehow by some supernatural means I lose it, I will replace this one with another copy exactly like it. The Longfellow is phenomenal, and Dante's poetic mind, his poetic genius, is beyond anyone else coming before him for the most part. I think that it's completely on par with such poets as Ovid and, of course, Euripides and Aristophanes. The great Greeks, however, as developed as they were, did not quite go so far as he did in developing the poetic form. So I have to put him there. He doesn't go further than that, however, because I have not finished this book yet. Well, shall I say this, I mean, you could pretty much call this the Holy Trinity of literature. The 3 books of the Divine Comedy are all amazing. I don't care what anyone says. They are all amazing. You have to read them all. So, there he is. I have not read it all, though. So, unfortunately, he stays in the not quites. Next, you know what? I have all of my books laid out on my couch and around me here, so there's very little space. I'm really, not that there's much space usually anyway. I'm always scrunched into this corner of my sofa here, just trying to stay out of the way of all the amazing, amazing tomes I am constantly trying to finish. Okay, now, next. This is Ralph Waldo Emerson. Yes. He is, along with Whitman and Henry David Thoreau and Nathaniel Hawthorne, he is you could pretty much say he is the founder of what we would call the American literary canon, along with all of them. He was not a political figure. He was not a clergyman. Or wait. You know what? No. Wait. No, I think he actually was a clergyman for a time, I believe. Okay, I am actually not entirely sure. So, his son was Okay, I cannot say that with certainty. I do think he was, though, for a time. So he's not entirely secular. Not entirely, but he's not a political writer. He was not a political figure. Therefore, he's not with Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, and whatnot, in a more, on the more political side of American literature. He's, although Benjamin Franklin does get very personal too, very literary. But strictly, in literary terms, Ralph Waldo Emerson is, along with the others I've mentioned, the canonical writer of the early 19th century in America. And he is also, like Plato, seen everywhere after his death. Everywhere. He is everywhere. This is his select essays and addresses, including The American Scholar, an amazing essay about the responsibility of educated people. The reason that he stays here on this part of the list is because, again, I have not read enough of him. I have not read very much of his poetry, and I have only read a small number of his essays. As amazing as they are, I need to read more for him to rise on the list. Next, I have Percy Bysshe Shelley. Percy Bysshe Shelley. Is there any English poet more just sensitive to the soul to the soul in just about everything. He could find the soul in literature, in the world around him, in very, shall we say, unsavory characters in life, who he represented very well in his narrative poems, in his dramatic work. He did a good job at really looking past merely appearances. A lot of poetry up to Percy Bysshe Shelley, Wordsworth, Byron is largely observational. It's largely about things that are noticed about people, noticed in the natural world, etc. There's a lot of that floating around. Wordsworth revolutionized that by internalizing it more. He brought more of the natural world into the human being, and a lot of poets just would comment on it. They observed it, and they seemed to think, I am no scholar, but they seemed to believe that the natural world and the human largely existed separately. They could coexist. They did blend, but they were not one and the same. Wordsworth combined them. He united them. And you see a lot of that in Percy Bysshe Shelley, a unison with the natural world. So this is wonderful. The reason that he stays here is that, to be honest with you, I have read 30, 40 of his poems. And the reason he stays on this area of the list as a not quite is that while it is very beautiful, it is extremely soulful. It's not quite Shakespeare, in that it is not quite so rich. It's beautiful, it has so much to offer, but it's not as rich as someone like Shakespeare. Yes, I put him with Dante, but again, that's because neither one of them are quite so rich as Shakespeare. So that's that. And just to get it out of the way, I have my complete collection of Shakespeare's works here. I am now in the maybes, and I have my complete collection here. Here he is. Oh, bookmark there. Here he is. This is an Oxford. I love Oxford. I love everything about the Oxford University Press, and everything about, I mean, pretty much anything that, it's just amazing. It's absolutely amazing. This collection, of course, has, I mean, it's lasted all these years because Shakespeare did, in literature particularly, he did invent the human being as we know it. Harold Bloom would have you believe that he invented the human being almost entirely. But in literature for sure, in drama, in poetry, he gave us the complete picture of the inner person. So he is always relevant. He is always, well, even when people think he is or not, he is present. All of the story arcs in movies, shows, games, every story arc you've ever seen, every romantic comedy, every drama, every, well, you could call Titus Andronicus kind of a horror drama sort of play. Anything at all that you can think of as an arc, he perfected. He's the reason that we have the template for them all. So, and he is, I agree with Harold Bloom, he is the center of the Western canon. He's the culmination of the age before him, and then he is the father of the entire the entire canon that came after him, the literary mind in general that came after him, that he built it. So it's always, he's everything. He is everywhere, and he always will be. It's as simple as that. Why is he, however, on my maybe list? I'll be honest, because there are only a few plays of his that I truly could sit and read all day, every day. There were some that he wrote which he attempted extreme faithfulness to their original stories. They were histories, etc. And while they are brilliant, everything he does is pretty much brilliant, they don't always, shall we say, launch you off the ground. Not quite in the way Hamlet does, Macbeth, Othello, The Merchant of Venice, Much Ado About Nothing, Romeo and Juliet. They sweep you up and they take you away. And they take you to, it's not an escapist sort of flight they take you on. This is a very much cerebral, soulful, and imaginative journey they take you on. You question everything in your life. You think about everything that's going on. You think of all of the poetic truths of life. That's another reason he is not quite on my top favorites. His primary aim was for poetic truth. So there's a little bit that's missed with that. It's wonderful. It is. Hamlet is a very complete character. He's an intellectual, as you would say, for that time. But it's very poetic. Everything he does is poetic. So now we're into here we are, still on the maybes. Because, of course, every time I see a Shakespeare play or read one, I'm in love. I am in love, and I don't want to read anything else for the time that I'm sitting with him. So yes, on certain days, you could say he acts as one of my favorites. He stands in for a lot of my favorites. Now, the next I have here is Cynthia Ozick. Okay. Here she is. I don't only have 2 books of hers, believe me, but these were immediately available. So here they are. This is Fame and Folly, one of her truly fine collections of essays that I believe was nominated for, yes, the National Book Critics Circle Award. That was this one. And then this one right here is Quarrel and Quandary. I love that she chose alliterative titles for her major collections of essays before Critics, Monsters, Fanatics, and Other Literary Essays. So, I actually fell in love with criticism because of her. I started reading her about 4 years ago, and I couldn't believe what I was reading. For the first time in many years, I had to look up words that I had never heard. I had to work a little. For the first time in a while. I had to work a little for the pleasure that she brings. She's erudite, she's graceful, she's witty, she has a real bite. Every one of her essays has teeth. Her novels, I've only read one of her novels. I cannot judge the rest of them based on that. But while I was very entertained by it, I was very engaged, I was not blown away by it. But it's such a joy to read. The one that I read was Heir to the Glimmering World, and it is a joy. It's a beautiful joy to read. Now, she is one of the most prominent worshippers of one of my very, very favorite authors, who who you saw at the very beginning of this video, Henry James, and who you will be hearing much more about in a couple of minutes. He is the god of her idolatry, and for very good reason. And her writing, much of it mirrors his own. She wrote an essay called, you know what, I don't forget the name of the essay, because the thing that sticks out in my mind is the first line, I hate Henry James. And she goes into this long explanation as to the beginnings of her career as a writer, how she sacrificed so much of her life, she feels, for the love of his late phase. She wanted to be Henry James, but the late Henry James. You have to build to that. She only figured that out after she was already in her 40s. And so, you know, she said that was a bit disappointing for her. She had let life slip away in search of an art akin to that of one of the greats. Anyway, she is here because, again, the novel thing, I wanted a little bit more from that one novel. I will see how the rest of them are, but I love Her the Shawl. I think that's a great work, a great fictional work. I've read several of her novellas. She's amazing. Next. William H. Gass. Look at this thing. This is the William H. Gass Reader by Knopf. Of course, I love the Knopf Publishing House. I love all my Knopf editions. I really do. This was published right after William H. Gass died. It brings together a bunch of his novellas, short stories, essays, chapters and sections from his fictional works, from his longer fictional works. Two of which could be called novels, the rest of which could be called something between a novella and a novel. Talk about celebrating language. This man had a style that truly, when I first encountered it, I didn't know what to do with it. I really didn't. It was so scholarly. It had grace, but not to the level of Cynthia Ozick's, and purposefully not to that level. He was not one of those writers, he was not one of those scholastic minds who believed that one needed to maintain a constantly elevated perspective on literature, on life, on really anything. He was a professor of philosophy and an avid James Joyce devotee. So he believed that books should contain everything. A very Malerian sentiment. So yes, that he was amazing. The reason that he is not one of my top favorites, however, is because, I think that will become obvious when I show you who my favorites are. So that ends that. Now, top 5, my very favorite authors, my favorite writers of them all. They've changed so much in my life. They have changed my perspective on writing. They have changed my thoughts on language and on expression and on human beings, and there is so much to be had from them. I spoke in my introduction about the experience of reading. They are an experience. They are... Okay, let's begin. Here is, first off, Nathaniel Hawthorne. This is The Scarlet Letter. Yes, of course, this is my favorite my absolute favorite novel. It is, of all time. But The House of Seven Gables, The Marble Fawn, his earlier works, The Blithedale Romance, etc., his travel writings, the notebooks, his children's stories. Hawthorne, he was a literary mind. His life was literature. His mind was an entire... His mind was an age. It really was. He took an entire segment of time, the origins of the United States, the puritanical ancestry of pretty much everyone in the area around him, his friends, his family, his peers, everyone. He went back into history, he brought everything forward into his time, and then pushed all of his themes, his ideas, into the future with his prose, his astounding prose. So this has been my favorite novel, The Scarlet Letter, for some years. He's been my favorite writer for some years. He was a direct contemporary of Edgar Allan Poe, who used to be my favorite writer. But the genius of Hawthorne and of the other authors I am about to show you, including Henry James, of course, simply are not to be challenged. They cannot be surpassed, and they cannot really be approached by anyone who has an intent to surpass them. They just can't. Here is Hawthorne. Next. Oscar Wilde. These are the only two books I have of Oscar Wilde, but there's a lot in here. I have, of course, a picture of Dorian Gray. Yes, it's Victober. Oh, yes, I know. It is Victober, and I'm very excited about this. But here is a picture of Dorian Gray. And the collected Oscar Wilde, as this says, which is a little bit deceptive, because this does not actually collect... it collects a lot of his works. If I'm going to see that, though, on the title, the collected so-and-so, I want to see everything. This should contain it all, I should think. It's almost as good as saying the complete so-and-so. You might as well put it all in here. But what is in this? I've read it all. It's amazing. Oscar Wilde was amazing. His sense of humor, his astounding prose style, his way of dancing with knowledge, dancing with facts and truths, and with purposeful contradictions of all those things. He never stopped rolling, and he never stops making you ask questions, and then challenge him on a creative level, on a literary level. What exactly is valid that he does? How exactly can each one of his pieces be called what they are? An essay, a story, a novel, when they're all, it seems, a kind of satirization of the forms. Nothing really seems intended to be what it is. It's all ironic, and it's wonderful. So, there is that. I will be doing... I plan to do a video a day, just so everyone knows. So I will be, over the course of the next couple of months or so, doing some videos on each of these individual authors. I know that I'm still getting comfortable with this whole thing, with the camera, etc. I'm not as eloquent right now as I could be, and I'm not finding all of the right words, but I do plan to, in the cases of all the authors I see to be the most important, and of course all my favorites, I plan to give separate videos on each and every one of those. Speaking of, I have the one of my commenters, one of my very, very warm, I'm so surprised. I did not expect to have to have comments, to have a conversation already started just after the first day, after the first video. I mean, it's been amazing. You guys are, all of you are fantastic, and the warmth you guys have shown me, and this is fantastic. This is fantastic. I want you all to know you're all fantastic. This is great. But I got a request from one of you to see my Carlyle collection. That's what I have right now of my Carlyle collection. I will do, again, a separate video on Carlyle later. And I wanted to include him in my absolute favorite authors, but unfortunately I can't because I just started reading him. He is already he's a game changer. He is. He's another one of those that is going to change my reading life. But more on him later. This is not about him. You see, I have Sartor Resartus, the Taylor Retailored. Love it. The French Revolution, a giant thing that's just sublime. And this tiny little book, thin little book, Past and Present, which, to my absolute delight, has an introduction by none other than Ralph Waldo Emerson. Love it. Okay, but my next favorite here. Here we go. James Joyce. James Joyce. These are only two of the books that I have by him. I have his letters. I have all of his major novels. I have Dubliners, the short story collection. And, of course, The Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, on which currently I'm actually writing a piece. I'll let all of you know when it's finished. But I did not expect what I got going into this thing. This is one of the finest novels I've ever seen. And there's so much to love, so much well, it is definitely one that will enrich your life. So, you have to read this. And then this one here, of course from Oxford. I love my Oxford University Press books. I love these. James Joyce's occasional critical and political writing. A lot of it's translated from Italian. He was writing in Trieste and in a couple of other places, but they're translated from Italian. Quite a few of them. This is the first collection to include so many of his nonfiction writings in one place, and this is so fantastic. A lot of people I know have an issue with James Joyce's style. I know James Joyce immediately brings to mind so many different, very pessimistic things. He's difficult. He's bloated. He's pretentious, pompous, vulgar. So many things, right off the top of anyone's head. There's a lot there. But he is the reason. He is the modern era. James Joyce is. He's the reason we have so much in fiction as we do now. We can get dirty. That we like to get dirty. We get our everything down in the mud and up, as Wilde wonderfully said, up in the stars, to which we are constantly looking, those of us who actually are open to the universe, to greater things, to larger things. And that's what he has. He has it all. He has the mud and the stars. And we, as I've read him, I can't get enough. I can't. I'm on my second time over this book here, The Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, in this beautiful, beautiful, beautiful Penguin Classics Deluxe Edition. If you can get this, do. It has a very disappointing foreword, I do have to say. I will say. It has a bit of it's a small little appreciation, I suppose, as it were, called The Long Way Home by, what is this, Nosgard? Yeah, Carl Ove Nosgard. He's a big selling kind of somewhat literary stylist, and he wrote the forward to this. It's interesting as a bit of an appreciation, but I was hoping for a little more out of, especially, I mean, an edition like this that is so complete with the notes, with everything. There's a wonderful introduction, however, in the official introduction to it, which it's obscene that they don't mention the writer's name right on the cover. And it is by Seamus Dean. And it's with his notes and his introduction, which make the gold and platinum of the portrait, I should say, even shinier. Wow, this edition, you have to get it if you can. Okay, now, next comes next and finally, I believe, we had James Joyce, Oscar Wilde. Oh, no, I have, okay, 2 more here. Here we go. All right. Here she is. This is Virginia Woolf, as you can see right here. Virginia Woolf, my Virginia Woolf right here. This is her collection, The Death of the Moth and Other Essays, published posthumously by her husband, with an introduction by, or well, an editorial note by her husband. Wow. What else can I say about Virginia Woolf? Wow, and wow. What a thinker, what a writer, what a beautiful, beautiful mind in every way. And I have read all of her major novels, almost all of her short fiction, her amazing essays, and the book length included. Of course, I mentioned these in the first video in my introduction, 3 Guineas and A Room of One's Own. These are wonderful. If you haven't read her, if you haven't, I'm going to do a complete video again on her, as well as most of the others that you see here. So her individually, I will focus on her. If you haven't read her, you have to. You must. Okay. And it looks like I'm going to have to wrap this up pretty soon anyway, because I have my sister's dog with me right now. His name's Oswald. He's this adorable tiny little thing, and he's asking to go outside. So okay, now finally I have the great and powerful, oh, there he is. Oh, hi baby. Oh, look at that. Look, here they are. Let me get you up here. Sweetie. Don't you sandbag on me. Look at you. He doesn't want to be picked up. There he is. Hi baby. This is Oswald. He's actually he's my sister's dog, but the whole family just adores him. He's staying with us until Sunday right now, so we get to keep him for a little bit. He's amazing. I'll take you out in just a bit. I promise. You don't want to be held. I'll take you out in just a bit. Okay. Here we go, sweetie. Okay. And finally, you saw at the very beginning, my dear Henry James, my amazing. Do you get more perfect prose than this? Anywhere. This is perfection. This is Mozartian perfection. I cannot find a flaw in his prose at all. I don't know why anyone complains. I will admit, I cannot understand why anyone complains about the reading experience of The Wings of the Dove, or The Ambassadors, The Golden Bowl, or his late essays, which are even more, shall we say, as in the words of his most vehement detractors, opaque works. I have learned so much about the sentence from this man. I know why Cynthia Ozick is such an enormous... No, she's not just a fan. She's not. And neither am I. We are both worshippers. We are... He is my Baal. I mean, this is amazing. He is amazing. This is fantastic. So, right here I have his novels from 1901 to 1902. I have an entire collection, however, from the Library of America of his novels, his short stories, essays, etc. It's astounding. He's so... He puts you, indeed, which I say, again, I have said, I do not read to be put into the mind of someone else. He does that. He does put you into the mind of someone else. But there's so much more to it than that. There's so much more to it than just a character arc, than just absorption in and by a fictional person in his work. These are analyses, his novels are analyses of the world around us. They're a look into ourselves. And the prose itself is just so... No matter what you're thinking, no matter what kind of a reader you are, in some way or another, he elevates your mind a little. He gives you a lift in your speech, your imagination. There are things he adds to you that they do refine little pieces of you. This is amazing. I love it. And his essays on culture here. Can we join James on culture? This is so good. So good. I love the late period. Most of these are from his late period, and they're just so good. So good. Okay, so that concludes this video here. That's going to be it for this one. Oh, 47 minutes. Okay. Well, you guys are already, you've been phenomenal. I get a little ahead of myself, I know. I get very much ahead of myself when I'm gushing about books. I will do my best to rein in a little bit more of my extreme gushing as I continue along. But I had to show you all of these. These are amazing. These are the writers that pretty much make my world go round. So thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys again for responding, for already starting a conversation. I look so forward to seeing your comments, responding to as many of them as I possibly can, and seeing you in the next video. And keep being all of you. You guys have been so great. Thank you guys.